Let's start with a very brief introduction to your upbringing and your early life.
Sure. My upbringing was, I'm one of 5 children. My parents came over from Nigeria in the 60s. We grew up in a household, actually for my first few years, because in those days it was quite hard when you were obviously coming to a new country and settling down, having 5 children.
Yeah.
So for the first, I think from roughly the age of 2 up to about the age of 7, we used to live outside London, Chelmsford, which of course nowadays doesn't seem so far away, but then was. We were sent to a nanny, so we kind of had, in inverted commas, foster parents, a nice white family who myself and my younger brother used to live with. My parents would come on the weekend, and that was because, you know, they were here, they were working sometimes 2 jobs and also studying in the evening as well. So
did that have an impact on the way you grew up in terms of your ideas, your personality?
Probably, I mean,
even inadvertently, I mean.
Yeah, it's a good question actually. It's something that I have asked myself over the years, and I think maybe subconsciously, potentially it did. I do remember, for example, and again, it was just because, you know, there wasn't a lot to go around at the time. I remember that sometimes we would go to school, myself and my younger brother, and what the school would do would be, once we got to school, they'd actually give us a new set of clothes because our clothes were so tattered.
Wow.
So that I guess that we'd feel comfortable and not out of place or stigmatized by other students in the school. So I think in a funny type of way, you know, the fact that I have a bit of an OCD about the way I look now probably harks back to my childhood and remembering that, you know, I had to change the clothes that I was wearing. So probably, yeah, subconsciously it did have an effect.
So you moved to Chelmsford, which is now East London, towards that side?
Well, it's still Essex, but yeah,
Essex,
it's you know, it's still, even from East London, it's still a good hour's drive
I see,
away.
okay.
Yeah.
And did you find that growing up in Chelmsford, which is known to perhaps be one of the more deprived areas of the UK economically, or perhaps not as affluent as some other areas, did that have an impact on yourself and the environment you lived in?
Not necessarily. You see, Chelmsford was in those days, and still is till today, because it's outside London, so you have a lot more greenery.
Yeah.
So Chelmsford is quite a well-to-do area. I mean, of course, you've got many working class areas in and around Chelmsford.
Right.
But I mean, I was only there till the age of 7.
Okay.
So at the age of 7, my parents had obviously settled down and maybe finished studying and felt, you know, that they could obviously have their children back with them. So we came back to East London, which is where I spent the majority of my childhood. But Chelmsford, I mean, yeah, because I was so young, I left there at 7. I just remember snippets of my time there. I remember, of course, our white foster parents and the school, and of course being there with my younger brother, and remembering, of course, looking forward to my parents coming to visit us on the weekends.
Yeah. Teenage years is a very rocky time of life. I've very recently just come out of that phase, so I'm aware. How was it like growing up? So you mentioned that you moved to East London after Chelmsford at the age of 7 or 8.
Yeah.
How was it like growing up as a young man during that phase of your life?
I guess just like any other kid at that particular age, you know, you want to fit in. You are concerned about what other people think about you. So I guess from the age of about 7 to about 11 or so, again, yes, I was back in East London, so obviously that would be my primary school years. Of course, we remember it fondly. Because of course you get to play a lot, you don't have to worry about you know, what you're going to be when you grow up, for example. Although of course those pressures were always there at home, coming from a Nigerian family. But yeah, at the age of 11, my father had already set up in Nigeria.
Okay.
And the idea was that we were now going to go as a family and go to Nigeria and set up over there and continue schooling and everything else. So we went en masse to Nigeria, myself and my 4 siblings, 1 sister and 3 brothers. So that was an eye-opener, because I think round about that time, I wouldn't go as far as to say I was going off the rails, but, you know, 11 years old, you know, impressionable young man.
Very exposed.
Yeah, exposed. I mean,
yeah.
I finished the first year of my secondary school in the UK.
Okay.
And so I could see, you know, Allah knows best, but maybe some of the people that I was starting to hang around with, and I say hang around, I mean, you know, I'd still have to be home by 3:45. But, you know, the things that
yeah.
we maybe get up to at school. The point I'm trying to make is when I actually shifted to Nigeria, I think it was an eye-opener for me.
Yeah.
It was character building for me. You know, I went to Nigeria thinking I was some bad boy, young man, because, you know, I'd gone with some friends and had a fight with a bunch of kids from another school, and
yeah.
we managed to beat them up. So I thought I was really strong. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I was ranked quite highly. Don't ask me how we came to this conclusion.
Yeah.
You know, maybe in the top 10 of the fighters in my school at the time, first year students.
At the age of 11?
School. At the age of 11, exactly. So that was the mentality I went to Nigeria with. And I remember picking on a Nigerian kid who was about half my size. But within 5 minutes, I soon realised that, you know, you should never judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
So little experiences like this, and of course the hardship over there, I'd like to think helped in
How long did you stay in Nigeria for?
I did my O-levels over there, so around
Okay.
about the age of 16, I came back to the UK.
What kind of core differences did you find in terms of the society, the environment, growing up, or living your years when your mind is developing, you're open to understand now your freedom of expression and belief? How did that compare to living in the UK and growing up?
I think one of the things that struck me, even at the tender age of 11 or 12, was that I'd already been questioning the existence of God
Yeah.
at that age. And Allah knows best, but, you know, I was inclining towards disbelieving in the existence of God, or not.
Did you grow up in a religious family?
In the sense that, I mean, we were not churchgoers, but yes, religious in the sense that God was always part and parcel of our lives and what we did and how we interacted with people.
Yeah.
I guess at that age or that stage, my parents had never really found a church that they could feel was theirs.
Did you feel like your parents had tried to instill the belief of God, of theism, and, you know, the belief in a God into you?
Definitely. It was definitely subconscious. It wasn't as though we got Bible lessons from our parents, but yeah, it was, as again, it was part and parcel of our life. You know, God was part of the vocabulary of most of the sentences that were constructed by anybody, well, predominantly my parents in the house. So we grew up with that understanding and that awareness of a higher being. But maybe because of the pressures of society, or maybe what people around me were saying, I was already beginning to question the existence of God. And going to Nigeria brought home to me how integral belief in God is, be that whether you're a Christian or a Muslim. So, you know, just walking down the street and seeing every other car having Jesus is Lord or Allahu Akbar, you know, graffitied on the side of the bus.
Yeah.
And of course a mosque and a church on every corner, every street corner, made me realize how integral, you know, this concept of God was there.
So you'd lived in 2 countries, you had gone into fights, you had perhaps a shaky relationship with the belief in God at one point in your youth. What would you perhaps pinpoint to be your most challenging moments growing up?
I think just like any other teenager, it was about a number of things. It was about understanding my position in life, my purpose in life. It was reconciling the reality that I was living away from my mother because she had come back to the UK.
Yeah.
And I wasn't living with my father either because he didn't have the capacity to look after us. My two older siblings had gone to university in Nigeria. My sister had come back to the UK to continue her university here in the UK. So I was in Nigeria with my youngest brother, and we were living with aunties and my grandmother. And it was just trying to understand the whole dynamic of how we ended up there and why our parents are not around, and how do I navigate, you know, this kind of choppy seas of life and where I am now. I mean, alhamdulillah, at that young age, children are quite adaptable, so we adapted to the environment where we were in, but I guess, you know, there was a lot of confusion as well.
Explain to me your introduction to not just the belief in God, but the religion of Islam particularly.
I think if you speak to many people who've reverted to Islam or to any religion for that point, I think a common thread you will find, in my opinion, is that there's no single moment that suddenly changes your life. There are a series of events that you may not be able to connect until you maybe look back with the benefit of hindsight. So, for example, I remember that one of the influences probably was the fact that I read the book of Malcolm X, never with the intention of becoming a Muslim, but just found him an intriguing character. I wanted to know more and was very much impressed by it. I think going to Nigeria and hearing the adhan for the first time, because of course here in the UK I hadn't heard it before. And my auntie, who sadly passed away recently, was my first kind of encounter with Islam, because she was, mashallah, very religious, and I would wake up in the morning just to maybe go and use the toilet and see her praying. And I remember thinking things like, why on earth would somebody follow religion that's this difficult? But it was that exposure that I had. But I guess the key moment was my relationship or my friendship with a friend of mine who introduced me to Islam, and we had many evening and nights discussing Islam and religion in general.
Did you ever find a conflict with your Christian beliefs growing up, or did you feel that perhaps your beliefs as a Christian lacked something, that needed to be something which could fulfill you and uplift you as a soul, as a spirit?
No, to be honest, I wasn't particularly religious. I remember that in Nigeria I had gone to church on and off. I remember when I came back to the UK, I got involved with the Mormon movement for a period of time, maybe 6 months or so, until I decided that wasn't really for me. And then I just remember being a young man who had this kind of remote concept of God, but didn't really impact on my life that much. So I wasn't really, I thought at the time, searching for God when God found me.
So what appealed to you in terms of the values of Shia Islam, the teachings, or perhaps any stories which really struck you and pulled you into this direction?
Yeah, I think some of the initial conversations that I had with this friend of mine who was from a Sunni background, it was really, I think what did it for me was the way he was able to make that connection between Christianity and Islam. So here I am, I've grown up having some idea of the religion of Christianity. I have had some Bible study lessons in the past. I know a fair bit about some of the prophets in the Bible. And I have this concept of Islam being a religion from the subcontinent, because when I was in East London, everybody was from that particular part
Eastern
of the world.
orientated,
of course, until I went to Nigeria, and then obviously found out more as I grew older. So I started to realize that this religion, Islam, wasn't the antithesis of Christianity. In actual fact, they kind of work hand in hand. That's how I saw it at that particular moment in time. So I think, and I felt as well, that it helped me to understand Jesus Christ, peace and blessing be upon him, a lot better then I thought I knew him
Yeah.
through the religion of Islam.
Were there any special individuals which brought you in, or perhaps stood out to you as the figureheads in allowing you to convert towards the religion of Islam?
Yeah, I think because obviously my first gateway, if you like, was a generic understanding of Islam. And with regards to the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt particularly, I knew absolutely nothing. All I'd come across were Oriental writers who had maybe spoken about Islam and touched upon Shiism, or other non-Shia Muslim writers who had written about Shiism. So my understanding was along the lines of they are Muslims, but they're heretics and they're obsessed by the number 12. It was only until, because what would happen is I would always, as I began to search and find out more about Islam, I would always share my experiences with Muslims and tell them that, listen, I'm actually I'm researching Islam and I'm finding it quite interesting. Looking back now, I think I was actually probably looking for some sort of assistance or encouragement. And the encouragement was there, but it would normally be a one-off conversation and then it would be left there.
Yeah.
However, I remember meeting a Sayyid Pakistani brother who was a follower of the Ahlul Bayt, and he asked me the question. He first of all commended me on my research and then asked me whether or not I knew anything about Shia Islam, to which I said, yeah, of course, they are Muslims, but they're a bit obsessed with the number 12. He then introduced me to the personality of Imam Ali alayhi salam, who I was aware of, but aware of, again, from that perspective as being the fourth caliph of the Muslims, one of the political rulers who was quite religious. So, you know, he would share what he knew and he would give me pamphlets and small books, particularly dealing with the Fada'il of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. And he was my gateway, if you like, into Shia Islam.
You converted to the religion of Islam by the age of 23, I believe. What challenges did you face from that time up until now as being a revert in the community, as being someone who was not born into the faith, if any at all?
Yeah, of course, I'm sure you will find that there are a number of challenges. I think the biggest challenge always is oneself, to be honest with you, even till today, because it may sound like an excuse, but I honestly believe, at least for me, 23 years of being programmed, or myself programming myself to think in a particular way, I still see elements of pre-Islamic myself even till today.
Like what?
Like in terms of anger, maybe, in certain circumstances. Of course, I'm not saying that, you know, by becoming a Muslim, you suddenly become an angel.
Do you think those Muslims who are perhaps brought up in the faith, or who have learnt about the faith from a very young age to a particular extent, are more able or have a better opportunity to have better willpower to combat stuff like anger and any other?
Yeah, I mean, I say anger. Of course, it's not just anger. It could just be attitudes. It could just be, force of habit. For example, you know, as you know, we as Muslims are supposed to lower our gaze. Yeah. And every now and again, you know, I may catch myself not lowering my gaze. Now, that could just be me where I'm at today in my path towards Allah, inshallah. Or it could just be, it just feels like it's something, you know, because in those days it wasn't about, you know, you didn't have modesty. You would make it known that you're, not only are you looking, but, you know, so it's kind of like, is this part of that programming of the past, or is this just where I'm at today? Yeah. You know, it's hard to break it down, and sometimes, you know, you could spend expend a lot of energy trying to decipher where the root is, when really the focus should just be on, well, let's fix it.
In terms of externally, the impression that the community around you got, understanding that this is the community that you had grown up in East London, were they accepting? Were they not just accepting, but also welcoming to your reversion?
You see, East London in the 1990s as a revert was one where we had one centre, if I'm not mistaken, maybe two. And they were predominantly Pakistani, Punjabi centres.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really somewhere I would frequent a lot. One centre which is quite close to me even till today, I used to go to for Jummah prayers. But, you know, there wasn't really much there for me.
Yeah.
Were they accepting of me? Yeah, I don't think they were unwelcoming. I remember going into mosques. It doesn't happen nowadays, really. And that's not just because I've been on TV. I think for the majority of reverts, they can walk into any centre and there won't be 30, 40 people looking over their shoulder.
Yeah.
And I honestly, because of course we should give people the benefit of the doubt, I honestly believe it was because they were just curious and maybe even bewildered. Why is this guy coming to this centre?
Yeah.
And maybe for some of those people it was seen more as a cultural centre as opposed to a religious centre. So yeah, we had those looks and, you know, maybe even experienced some negativity from time to time. But of course, as the years have progressed, you know, I'm just one of many reverts of different colours and creeds. So,
saying that, do you feel that even today in 2016, there are challenges which the revert community faces when they join, and not only that, but are the Shia community at large doing enough to act as a support and to even establish support structures for newcomers into the faith?
No, I don't think we are. Are there challenges? Definitely, there always are. I think we as a community, the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, have a number of issues which I think have slowly dissipated over the years, because I don't think it's just the reverts. I think you may feel alienated if you're a Pakistani going to an Iranian centre. Right. Again, less so now, or I don't know, a Khoja going to an Iraqi centre, for example. Again, alhamdulillah, with the younger generation and with the growth of English lectures, it brings us closer together because of the common grounds, common grounds, common language. But you know, we have to realise and appreciate that many of us have come from a particular part of the world and used to commemorating and even, okay, maybe not worshipping, but commemorating and holding majalis in our own particular cultural context. And I think it takes time for us to maybe open up and interact and even appreciate other cultures when it comes to Azadari, for example.
Yeah. I think a common observation is that the revert community and newcomers into the faith, once settled down and integrated, find troubles or perhaps any difficulties in selecting spouses and looking for a life partner. Do you feel that this exists? And if so, why is that the case?
Undoubtedly it exists. I think, again, it harks back to some of the stuff that we've spoken about. I think what makes it more difficult is that reverts don't really have the family background that many parents are looking for, especially if you're a male looking to marry or looking to get married. And of course, I think if we were to analyse it according to race as well, it gets even more difficult the darker that you are. It could also have to do with your economic potential as well. So it may not necessarily always be about colour. It just could be the fact that, you know, parents don't necessarily feel that you're in a financial position to cater for their child. So I wouldn't want to sit here and say that everybody's racist, particularly towards blacks, but do blacks find it difficult to find spouses? 100% definitely is the case.
Saying that, did you perhaps, in your own particular experience, did you have any challenges when looking for a spouse? Of
course. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't because I wasn't trying, because if you think about it, if we were to do the maths, you know, I told you I converted when I was 23 years old.
Yeah.
And I would say probably within 2-3 years, I was thinking about marriage.
Yep.
You know,
Absolutely.
in my mid-20s to late 20s. It wasn't until my mid-30s I actually got married.
Okay.
So we're talking a good 12 years after reverting to Islam before I was able to get married.
Was that purely because it was hard to find a suitable match? Or?
Of course, yeah, definitely. You know, we are a minority as it is, followers of the Ahlul Bayt, and then you're a revert within this community of the followers of the Ahlul Bayt. So, yeah, I mean, and there were a number of opportunities to at least interact with potential spouses, but yeah, never came to fruition. Again, Allah knows best. It could be for reasons other than the fact that I was a revert. It could be for reasons other than the fact that I was black. Allah knows best.
You recently were the presenter of a documentary on Ahlul Bayt TV called Shades of Racism, which tried to explore and to evaluate the reality of ethnic discrimination within the Muslim community at large. What kind of inspired you to go out there and to do this? Do you believe that there is an innate racism within the Shia community, and does it exist?
Yeah, I started off believing that the racism is more implicit, is kind of institutional, but and maybe is something that we do subconsciously or we act upon subconsciously. And to be totally honest with you, at the conclusion of the documentary, I think my original thesis was borne out. I can't say that I've ever really suffered any explicit racism as a revert, as a black person. But of course, I think just because we're human beings, and of course we are shaped to one degree or another by, you know, society, be that our own cultural beliefs, or whether it's the society in which we live. In fact, I think to a large extent, us living in the West in a relatively cosmopolitan society like the UK helps us overcome some of those prejudicial tendencies that we had prior to maybe even coming to live in the West.
You mentioned earlier that you had read the autobiography of Malcolm X growing up. Did that perhaps play a part in the way you thought? Did you, I don't want to say a bias, but did you have a particular opinion on the westernization of opinion, Orientalism? I'm sure you must have read the works of Edward Said when he wrote Orientalism in 1978. It all goes to show that at that particular time, the community in the West viewed North Africans and Middle Eastern people in a certain way. Do you feel that within the Shia community we are just as bad perhaps when judging people of a different race or a different colour? You mentioned as well when it comes to marriage, but remembering as well that tracing it back to the teachings of the Imams alayhi salam, and also the examples in their own lives, that they would intermarry into different cultures, they would marry women of different colours. Is that something we forget a lot of the time?
Yes, I think we do, and I think that we are a product of the society, or maybe not the society, because again, as I said, I think in a large way, us living in the West has a positive effect on the way in which we look at others, those
Yes.
who are not the same as us. But I think, yeah, definitely. I mean, if we look at African culture, I'm talking about black African culture here, or culture in the subcontinent, you know, this whole concept. I remember a Pakistani young lady who I used to work with many years ago when we were at university, went on holiday.
Okay.
And she came back from holiday and had a nice tan, and her mother was furious. She said, "Who on earth is going to marry you now looking this dark?"
Gosh.
So listen, these are certain realities, and I think, of course, I think the first hurdle to overcome is to recognize that we have had, or it's had an impact on us. And of course, that's the first way of us overcoming. Of course, knowing the stories of the Imams, or understanding theoretically that Islam is colorblind is fine.
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily saying that the way to overcome that is now to now go and give your daughter to a Chinese Muslim person. I'm just saying, you know, maybe the first step or the first hurdle to overcome is to first and foremost realize that it's affecting us in one way or another.
Absolutely. We had discussed how you presented the documentary on Al-mostabserin-The, Shades of Racism. Going back prior to that, what perhaps did Al-mostabserin-The offer you in order to give hours of your time every week to come here, to be involved in a show or a documentary? What sold to you about this project?
It's quite simple. It's very simple. In fact, it was Imam Hussein alayhi salam. In the past, I had been asked to speak. You know, every now and again, I'd get a phone call asking me to come and give a series of majalis for Muharram, and I've always shied away from it because, of course, it's a big responsibility. For somebody like me, it would take hours on end. Although I've done some preliminary Hausa studies, I'm not at a level where I'd feel comfortable. And I kind of felt guilty about turning down those invitations, but also felt that I had a responsibility to not to go out there if I felt I was not ready. And then Ahlul Bayt came knocking. It was Muharram, and I think I got a phone call from Amir. I'd come on one of the shows previously, just as a guest. And I think I got a phone call from Amir, and he said to me, Sister Rebecca's going to be out in Karbala for Muharram. So we would like you to take her place and present. And of course, I felt like, of course, I can never claim that I've given Imam Hussein anything. But to give up a few hours of my day to help the channel propagate the message of Imam Hussein during these 10 days of Muharram, it was a no-brainer. Yeah. So, you know, I accepted the offer straight away. And of course, what the channel was doing was trying to use that opportunity because, of course, there were speakers who've come over to the UK in London giving majalis. So in the daytime, they would ask them to come around about 2 o'clock to come and share their knowledge with us. So again, it was a no-brainer.
And you've been presenting now for about five or 6 years?
Yeah, 2009 was when I started, yeah.
Okay, so 7 years,
yeah.
give or take. How, or perhaps what's been your most memorable moments or your most fun show, or any bad shows you've had, any good shows?
No, I mean, alhamdulillah, they've all been great because I always considered it to be my own majlis. You know, I considered myself, okay, I'm sitting in the presenter's chair, I'm putting the questions to my guest, but in essence, I'm learning. This is even better than the majlis because it's not a monologue, it's a dialogue. And of course, alhamdulillah, I've had the opportunity to sit with many esteemed scholars, and inshallah, I hope I've learned a lot along the way.
Tell me about the Shia community in Nigeria. It's a growing community. It's 20 million people, I've heard. Phenomenal numbers, and many people don't even know that there is a community. Could you elaborate a bit on who they are and their demographics?
I think with Nigeria, what you have is a community, particularly, I say Nigeria, but of course this spreads across the whole of West Africa.
Okay.
So you have a majority Muslim community in West Africa as a whole. Of course, after the colonialism, Christianity became quite popular, but even still, Muslims are the majority. That aside, what you have with regards to the followers of the Ahlul Bayt is pre-revolution in Iran, 1979, you have very few Shia.
Yeah.
They were predominantly Sunni Malikis. After the revolution in Iran, and of course Imam Khomeini spent a lot of time with Tabligh, and a lot of the students stood up and took notice, and of course the advent of the internet and communication, slowly but surely Shiism began to grow. And West Africa has a strong Sufi tradition.
Right.
So the whole concept of wilaya, and even that connection, many of the tariqas, they attribute their source to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. For all of these reasons, it became quite natural. It was almost seamless for them to become followers of the Ahlul Bayt once they understood the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt and the Imams alayhim salam. So you're right, in Nigeria alone, we're having estimates anywhere between 5 to 25 million Shia. And of course, this is just one country. Ghana's another one, Ivory Coast.
But we've seen, a lot of clamping down on the Shia community in Nigeria, partly perhaps due to sectarianism, partly perhaps due to stringent kind of restrictions from the government, limitations on practice. For someone sitting in London, for someone observing in the West, what can we do about the persecution of Shias in Nigeria?
Of course, alhamdulillah, I think many of the mu'mineen here in the UK have and continue to exert pressure. Of course, there were the many demonstrations. Of course, we're a peaceful people. We have to exert as much pressure as we can in a peaceful way. So, there was a group set up particularly to focus on this issue. But of course, letters to MPs. We were in communication with the Nigerian High Commission here in London as well. And of course, speaking to people on the ground there, because they are fully aware of the dynamics and the intricacies of this particular issue as well. And what a lot of communities have done, or what particularly the followers of the Ahlul Bayt have done after this particular tragedy that took place, was they set up a kind of assembly, an Ahlul Bayt assembly of the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, so that they could have that status recognized by government, and of course make sure that there is nothing legally that is going to cause them any problems in the future. It's a work in progress. And inshallah, I know, because I've spoken to some of those who are integrally involved, that they are working hard to try and make sure something like this never happens again.
You had very recently, only a few weeks back, lost your auntie, who you yourself described to be like your second mother, back in Nigeria. How was your relationship with her? Were you a close person to her? I know you mentioned that you had noticed her praying and that she was perhaps an early encounter for you to understand more about the religion of Islam. Yeah. How was that?
I mean, my auntie, may Allah bless her, was a very kind lady. She was one of those people who would look out for not just her children, but the children of others.
Yeah.
We spent many years with her in Nigeria. And of course, as I mentioned, yes, one of my first Islamic memories was seeing her praying, but also she was very close to me and all of my siblings. Although I'm the only Muslim, you see, with her, I think I had an extra rapport because she had reverted to Islam, because she married, I think it was because of marriage, but after getting married and becoming a Muslim, she became very religious herself.
MashaAllah.
And maybe that's what attracted her to me more so, because I reverted to Islam, of course, later on. And I remember one of the times I'd gone back to Nigeria, it was, I think, for my brother's wedding. I hadn't been for many years. And of course, she knew I was a Muslim. She was very happy. And one day she just said, you're coming out with me. And she took me out and she went to take me to go and see an Islamic scholar. And it was just to see, is this guy, she was really big on the Quran. She wanted to make sure that I knew how to recite the Quran. So she took me to this sheikh who, of course, spoke Arabic. And I didn't know at the time, it was like a mini exam. And all he did was he asked me a few questions in Arabic. You know, we had a few, we exchanged a few pleasantries, and he told her, "Yeah, it's fine. He's good," and that was all she wanted from him.
Kind of confirmation.
Yeah, confirmation. And then we went home. The next day, she'd ordered this massive cow, and it was like a celebration that not only has he become a Muslim, but he can recite the Quran.
MashaAllah.
Let's have a big, you know.
Did you frequently visit her?
Yeah, of course. I mean, of the sadness of the situation was, I haven't been to Nigeria for, I think 2007 was the last time I was there, 9 years ago.
Yeah.
And she was not only close with me, she was very close to my wife as well.
Yeah.
And we've, of course, been in touch over the years, and she kept saying, "You guys don't come yet, but make sure you come soon. I want to see you and your children before you pass away." But, of course, unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be.
You have 3 young, beautiful children, Muhammad Ali, Zahra and Zainab. What advice do you give them growing up in the Western world as Shia Muslims, and to all other youth as well?
Of course, they're still relatively young, so I try not to heap too much advice on them at this young stage. But of course, at their juncture in life, it's all about pride.
Yeah.
I'm trying to instill in them this concept of, or this understanding of having pride in who you are.
Yeah.
Being proud of the fact that you're a follower of the Ahlul Bayt. Alhamdulillah, you're Muslim. But, you know, being proud of your color. Don't ever allow anybody to denigrate you because of anything that you are. Everything that you are is to be, you should be proud about that. And of course, trying to help them understand that no matter how bright you might be, it's all about hard work in this world. You know, because sometimes we found that when even when you come across somebody who's particularly bright, sometimes if you just rely on the fact that you're intelligent, that can be a downfall. But you may be an average student in life, but the fact that you will struggle and persevere and work hard, it generally pays off in the long run. So it's just, but again, you know, it's quite lightweight at the moment because you know, my oldest is 7, so I don't want to pressurize him too much.
By the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you've been blessed with the opportunity to go for ziyarah, visitation of the shrines of the holy Imams, as well as for Hajj, for the wajib religious pilgrimage. Tell me about the very first time you visited the shrine of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. What was going through your mind? What was going through your hearts at that very moment when you held the shrine for the first time?
It's a very good question, actually. The first time I went to Iraq and to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, I had already been to Mashhad. I'd already been to Medina and Jannat al-Baqi. I'd already been to Syria on a number of occasions. And of course, each and every time you go to a different Ma'sumin, the relationship and therefore the experience is somewhat different. The flavour's slightly nuanced in that sense. Imam Hussein alayhi salam was really surreal for me because I felt out of all of the Imams, he's the one I knew the most about. Admittedly, it was the later part of his life, but even in terms of his whole biography, he was the one that I knew the most about because I'd sat through, you know, 10, 11, 12 years of majalis and of course read a number of books on this particular Imam. And hearing his story year after year, and here I am, I'm actually within walking distance. You know, I can actually see where the Imam's buried over there. It just didn't seem, it just felt as though I'm here, but I'm not here. Surreal's the only adjective I can come up with to explain how I felt at the time. Of course, honoured, pleased, overwhelmed. It was, alhamdulillah, I'm really bad with memory. But of course, that is one of those moments that will, inshallah, stay with me until my dying days.
What does Imam Hussein alayhi salam mean to you to your objectives in life and to the person you want to be?
Sacrifice. I think Imam Hussein alayhi salam, his whole life was about sacrifice. I remember you asked me earlier about what inspired me to come and work for Ahlul Bayt TV. You know, can me giving up a couple of hours a day really? And that was the inspiration. I'm like, Imam Hussein alayhi salam gave me the Islam that I have today. He died so that I can benefit from this beautiful religion. So me giving up 2 hours or 3 hours in my daytime to pay back is not even, that's disrespectful to the Imam. To show some gratitude for what he's done for me is the least I could do. And everything about his life for me is about sacrifice. It's the first word that always comes to mind.
How would you like to be remembered, and what legacy would you like to leave this world when you leave this world?
I don't think I give it too much thought, to be honest. It's a good question. It's a very good question. How would I like to be remembered? I'm not sure. I would love to be. I'd love for a lot of people to turn up at my funeral, but that's just because, inshallah, I know there'll be a lot of mu'mineen there, and inshallah they would pray, they would recite Surah Al-Fatiha for me, and inshallah that first night in the grave would be easy.
Inshallah.
How would I like to be remembered? I just pray that I'm seen in a positive light, and I pray it's more about what legacy would I leave behind. My biggest concern in life is that my children grow up to hold fast to this deen of Islam, and I've seen it in many of the youth that they are able to integrate fully in this society. If you don't mind if you don't mind me saying it, you're a prime example of that, while at the same time holding on to their faith. So if I can leave this world knowing that my children are true followers of the Ahlul Bayt in everything that they do, in how they interact with people, and yet be comfortable with being British and black, then inshallah I'll leave this world a happy person.